Welcome back to Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobby Holmes. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of today's episode. I will have a trailer for another fun podcast. They're Terrified and Tipsy. This week's case was suggested by listener Samantha Arce. She wanted me to cover the case of John Gardner. It's somewhat comical, but there are 3 different John Gardners listed on Murderpedia. So I picked one and ran with it. Hopefully it's the one that you wanted, Samantha. Any Gardners out there, maybe avoid naming your sons John? The name seems to be cursed. Let's get a little background on the John Gardner I chose. John Albert Gardner III was born April 9th, 1979 in Culver City, California. He unfortunately grew up in a dysfunctional household. His parents were constantly fighting. John now states that his dad was a good father. He just didn't handle small children well. I don't know. I'm pretty sure parenting small children goes hand in hand with being a good father. But his was an alcoholic and beat John often with a belt. And his punishment crossed the line to abuse. It was probably for the best when his parents divorced, but as a child, he moved all around Southern California with his mom. His mother, Kathy Osborne, was a psychiatric nurse. She noticed many concerning signs exhibited by her young son. As early as 6 years old, John was lighting fires. Arson is one of the factors in the McDonald triad, the others being cruelty to animals and bedwetting. These 3 factors are predictive of violent tendencies. He was diagnosed with ADHD. But let's be honest, this is way more common than any of us even realize. Let's take a deep dive, shall we? There are 2 main types of ADHD. According to the CDC, one type presents itself as inattentive. It's hard for this person to finish a task, pay attention to details, follow instructions, or conversations. The person is easily distracted and forgets details. Then the second type is hyperactive and impulsive. The person fidgets and talks a lot. It's hard to sit for a long period of time. Children may run, jump, or climb constantly. They may interrupt others, grab things from people, or speak at inappropriate times. It's hard for the person to wait their turn or listen to directions. A person with impulsiveness may have more accidents and injuries than others. Some people have both inattentive and impulsive qualities. I'm sure as you hear me rattle off these symptoms, you have someone in mind that fits this description. In fact, the impulsive presentation has my name all over it. Treating ADHD can be a combination of medication and/or behavioral therapy. However, some believe it can be controlled with diet, exercise, and a good night's sleep. So just overall taking care of your health can help lessen the symptoms. Kathy started John on psychiatric medication at age 6, but John had way more than just ADHD going on. When he was 10, his mother admitted him to a psychiatric hospital for 60 days. I don't know the details that led to this decision, but imagine that as a 10-year-old child. 60 days away from your friends and family would feel like an eternity, assuming he had friends. The doctor evaluating John during his stay stated that he often used force to, quote, defend against feelings for abandonment, confusion, low self-esteem, and lack of control in recent circumstances, unquote. His list of meds included Ritalin, Zoloft, Paxil, and Wellbutrin, but he stopped taking them when he was 16. He was labeled, quote, severely emotionally disturbed by his teachers. The only thing in John's criminal record was getting arrested for trespassing as a teenager. Despite his reputation and inattentive, impulsive behavior, John Gardner graduated from Rim of the World High School in Lake Arrowhead, California, with a 3.2 grade average. And yes, that's a real place. Rim of the World Highway runs along the ridgeline of the San Bernardino Mountains, the tallest peaks in Southern California. After graduating, he moved to San Diego and got a job working at Big Five Sporting Goods. Cost of living must have been way low in 1997 because I know you couldn't live in San Diego on a Big Five salary nowadays. This emotionally disturbed teenager grew up to be a sexual predator. In the year 2000, a 13-year-old girl, who will remain unnamed for her privacy, was tired of being bullied at school. While walking to school, her neighbor, John Gardner, stopped to offer her a ride, but she would rather ditch that day and hang out with him. Keep in mind, he is now 21 years old. Instead of taking her to school, John drove her back to his house and put on a movie for them to watch. But only a few minutes in, he assaulted her. He reached over to pull down her pants and underwear. She kicked and screamed, fighting back. John grabbed her by the neck and choked her until she sat still. Then he hit her repeatedly in the face. She ran from the house without any shoes and her pants were unbuttoned. When John was later arrested, he blamed the girl's mother for beating her and denied any accusations. He eventually pled guilty for the assault, but stated it was only to avoid getting reamed in court. John was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but only served 5. During his incarceration, he often shared his homicidal fantasies with prison officials. But apparently that isn't reason enough to keep him locked up, and he was released on parole. Saying he had trouble adhering to the terms of his parole is an understatement. As a registered sex offender, you cannot reside within a certain distance of a school. John Gardner violated terms by moving in 2007 right next to a school. He was also charged with possession of marijuana on one occasion. Funny thing about that is the charge was later dropped. If these are the terms of parole and they are broken, why is he not back in prison? I mean, isn't that the whole point of parole? It actually gets worse. John wore an ankle monitor for 4 months. During this time, he racked up 168 parole violations. The ankle monitor had a GPS. He was caught parked outside of a daycare, as well as multiple different schools. He was loitering around the prison grounds. Police suspected John of passing illegal contraband to his old buddies. 168 times. That is absolutely ridiculous. And this makes me so angry because if John Gardner was thrown back in jail, 2 young girls would still be alive today. In February 2009, 14-year-old Amber DuBois was reported missing to police. It might be pronounced DuBois, but there is a city near my hometown spelled the same way, and us Pennsylvanians say DuBois. And I know I won't be able to refrain from pronouncing it this way, so I'm just going with that. Her mother, Carrie McGonigal, told Oxygen that Amber was a free-spirited kid. Quote, "She was concerned more with taking extra classes and graduating early than shopping or fashion, and had vowed never to miss even one day of class." Unquote. On February 13th, a car pulled up beside Amber as she walked to school. A man, John Gardner, forced her inside. He drove Amber to a secluded area where she was raped and ultimately stabbed to death. Amber's stepdad, David Cave, grew concerned when she didn't return home from school. He drove there to see if she was still hanging around. She was sent with money that day to buy a lamb from the 4-H club. He ran into one of Amber's teachers who told David that Amber was marked absent that day. That's when he realized something was very wrong. She would never miss a day of school, and she was especially excited about the 4-H project. The only leads police had was someone used Amber's phone to check her voicemails after she was abducted. The phone pinged off towers that covered the school and her home. Local sex offenders, as well as Amber's friends and family, were interviewed, but nothing stuck. Unfortunately, Amber DuBois' remains were not discovered for another year. She was treated as a missing person until then, and her parents were relentless in the search for their daughter. In December of 2009, the same year he murdered Amber DuBois, John attempted to abduct a woman jogging alone in the park. 22-year-old Candace Moncayo. She was passing John running the opposite direction and said hello, as she always did, passing by others in the park. John then tackled Candace to the ground and straddled her. She began screaming and he told her to shut up. She shouted back, "You're gonna have to kill me," to which John said, "That can be arranged." Candace knew her life was in danger and sat upright fast, using her elbow to hit John in the face. She reports feeling the crunch of cartilage in his nose. He let go of Candace and cupped his hands over his face. She was able to push him off of her and run as fast as her legs would take her to the closest house and call for help. But by the time the area was searched by police, John Gardner was long gone. John was bleeding from his nose, and blood samples were obtained from Candace's clothing. At first, her attack was treated as a robbery, not as an attempted rape, so police did not think to look at registered sex offenders in the area. 3 months later, in February of 2010, John abducted 17-year-old Chelsea King. The senior in high school was jogging alone in Rancho Bernardo Community Park. She never returned home from her run and was reported missing by her family. Pieces of Chelsea's clothing were found around the edge of Lake Hodges. Maybe John doesn't understand forensic science or that as a convicted sex offender, his DNA is kept on file, but semen was found inside of Chelsea's underwear. This semen was a match for John Gardner and was later linked to the blood sample from Candace's attack. John was tracked down in a local restaurant and arrested on February 28th, 3 days after Chelsea disappeared. At this time, only her clothing had been found. But on March 2nd, an FBI dive team found Chelsea. They were looking for her in the water, but she was buried in a shallow grave around the edge of the lake. Investigators knew without a doubt that Gardner was responsible for Chelsea King's death, but wondered if he was linked to the previous missing person case of 14-year-old Amber DuBois. John's lawyer approached the San Diego DA with a proposal. John Gardner would take them to the body of Amber DuBois as long as it could not be used against him as evidence in court. I honestly do not even understand that statement. Like, yeah, I killed her. I'll show you where I buried her, but you can't use it against me. I find laws like this so strange. Regardless, John led police down an old dirt road, through some thick brush, and ended up near an old rusty water tank. He stopped and pointed to the ground, stating that she was buried there. Sure enough, Amber DuBois' skeletal remains were recovered right where he said they were. Even though he led them straight to her, there was no physical evidence linking John to Amber's murder. Her parents were devastated to find out Amber was dead, but at the same time, they felt some sort of closure knowing what happened. The not knowing was becoming unbearable. They felt without any evidence, justice would never be served for their young daughter. But John Gardner had another deal to offer. He would plead guilty to the rape and murder of both Amber DuBois and Chelsea King if the death penalty was taken off the table. The prosecution team for the case of Chelsea King was initially gunning for him. It was a solid case and would no doubt receive capital punishment. But the King family wanted justice for Amber as well. They agreed to the plea deal so John would be tried for the murders of both girls. Chelsea's dad, Brent King, had this to say, quote, "The DuBois family has been through unimaginable hell the last 14 months. We couldn't imagine the confession to Amber's murder never seeing the light of day, leaving an eternal question mark," unquote. Part of John's agreement was to describe what happened to each one of the girls, but he did not share the details with the media in any of his interviews. John said, quote, "I'm only answering questions to the family in regards to that stuff. Anything involving those two, how things happened and whatever, I will not comment on any of that. I will answer questions to them and them only. With his prior conviction of assaulting a 13-year-old girl, the ages of Amber and Chelsea, it seems that he was targeting teenage girls. But he claims it wasn't about their age. John Gardner said, quote, "I actually didn't go out and look for them. I did not sit and wait for them. I go out on walks to calm myself. I go for a walk and for a drive just to calm down. I was aware of what I was doing, and I could not stop myself. I was in a major rage and pissed off at my whole life and everyone who had hurt me and blew up hurting the wrong people. I hate myself. I really do. There's no taking back what I did. And if I could, yes, I would. Are you kidding me? But I was out of control. If I was able to stop myself in the middle of it, I would have, and I could not. I was out of control," unquote. I disagree. He didn't just take out his rage and hurt these girls. He raped them first. He's in his 30s, and these are young teenage girls. Maybe he didn't stalk them beforehand, but I believe he picked them for a reason. May 14th, 2010, John Albert Gardner III was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. 2 terms of life imprisonment without parole for the murder and rape of Chelsea King and Amber DuBois. Another term of 25 years to life for assault with an attempt to commit a rape, and an additional 24 years of imprisonment for prior convictions. Since he entered the plea agreement, Gardner waived his right to appeal. He is currently serving his sentence at Mule Creek State Prison in California. The King family started Chelsea's Light Foundation. Those who raise funds, increase awareness, and celebrate Chelsea are dubbed change makers and help to keep Chelsea's light shining brightly. September 2010, Chelsea's Law was unanimously signed to help protect children against dangerous sexual predators. California legislation ensures that the state does everything it can to keep sex offenders who target children from engaging in more crimes upon release, and that those who commit the worst violent sexual crimes against children are put away for life. In other words, if a child predator violates their parole the way John Gardner did, they are most definitely headed back to prison, as he should have. That's it for today's episode. Please continue sending in your story suggestions. I love hearing from you guys. You can send them via email to KillerStoriesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Killer Stories Podcast, and I'm on Twitter at Killer Story Pod. If you wouldn't mind just taking a moment and leaving a written review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify, it really helps the show so much. Click the link in the show notes if you would like to shop podcast merchandise. Right now, there is a glass coffee can, a reusable felt air freshener, tie-dye shirts, and a crew neck sweatshirt. Don't forget to hang around for a sneak peek from Courtney and Stephanie and their Terrified and Tipsy podcast. As always, thanks so much for listening. Until next time, this has been a killer story.
Hi, friends.
Hi.
Welcome to They're Terrified and Tipsy.
So I'll start.
Okay.
My name is Courtney. I love long walks on the beach, white wine, and I absolutely love scary movies.
And I'm Stephanie. I also love long walks on the beach. I love white wine, but I absolutely hate scary movies.
So Stephanie,
Mm-hmm.
can I ask you a question?
Please.
Why in the hell would you want to watch scary movies and do a podcast on scary movies when you hate them?
Oh, that's easy. Because you forced me.
That's true. But you know what? There's wine.
Yeah, so I'm basically only here for the wine.
Lots and lots of wine.
We're gonna need it.
Well, since we have very different feelings about scary movies, we decided to share our emotional struggles with you all.
Yeah, so grab a glass of wine, your favorite couch blanket, and get comfy and enjoy the ride with us. Also, you can find They're Terrified and Tipsy on Instagram and Twitter, plus all the podcast platforms. For links, head over to tipsypod.com. Cheers!